Welcome to Play on Words, a theatrical podcast. Please turn off all outside distractions so as not to disturb the performance. I am Soren de-Niz, producer of Play on Words, and tonight I am joined by Ella Mizera, the director of Couples, Companions, Conspirators, a Shakespeare collection, as well as Leann Mullen, the dramaturg for this production. Welcome, Ella and Leann.
Hello.
Hello.
So we have you guys here from the Shakespeare collection production. And at first we were trying to decide when to do Shakespeare because we knew we wanted to do Shakespeare since we started the podcast, basically. But we didn't have like a director who was like passionate about Shakespeare. And I think you guys as a team have like definitely taken on the Shakespeare scenes and sonnets and like ran with it. Like, I'm so glad you guys are the ones who did Shakespeare because it's turning out so well.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
So the collection is called Couples, Companions, and Conspirators for a reason. What about these groups of people and characters is significant in Shakespeare's works?
Well, I think, it's just so fascinating how many types of relationships that Shakespeare can write. Personally, when I was looking for a theme, I wanted to go for something that wouldn't become repetitive, that had enough variety to keep audiences who maybe weren't familiar with Shakespeare interested, but also provide a range for the actors too. Um, and I think especially over the audio medium, focusing specifically on the relationships, which it was so hard to narrow down like four to focus on. Um, but focusing specifically on that, really gave a direction to the production and really helped bring the actors together as if it had been a live thing, which is hard, to build that camaraderie when we're all just talking. We're all just bodiless voices over Discord.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it was a very interesting approach to choose something honestly kind of like structural as the framework for building a script rather than like thematic. Because it brings in a lot of variety. Like Shakespeare was amazing with both tragedies and comedies and plays that fall somewhere in the middle or have elements of both. So instead of going with kind of like a more generic theme, like I don't know, like love or family
Mm.
conflict or something, building it around relationships um, really highlights the variety of the kind of work that Shakespeare wrote, and it also it's just a very exciting opportunity to like pick some of the most iconic like Shakespeare characters, like we have Macbeth and King Lear and
Mm.
Benedict and Beatrice and Lady Macbeth, like some of the roles that are like dream roles for a lot of performers and get to do them in kind of some of their most interesting stage scenes. That is a really exciting opportunity for performers and it makes for a very, very dynamic script that goes in a lot of different directions, which is kind of ideal for something that's a little episodic.
Mm.
Yeah, I would definitely call it dynamic. There's a lot of variety in the scenes you chose, but they do still like surround themselves around the relationships, which is really cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of variation, but they're all connected in different ways.
It was so
Yeah.
hard to pick just for there it, ultimately it had to be four scenes that like are able to flow into each other well enough to create like this emotional through line, but it's there were honestly so many good choices that it was very hard to narrow down. How do you pick from, all these awesome characters?
Yeah, yeah. Was there any scenes that you were hoping you would have done um, if you had more time or more opportunity to do more scenes?
Um, oh, I recall, um, I was considering, um, the scene between Falstaff and Prince Hal, where Falstaff's telling the tall tale of robbers that accosted him in the night. And Hal's like, yeah, yeah. Well, he doesn't know that it was actually Hal and his friends. Um, I'm trying to think what else.
Yeah, I remember that one particularly well. Another one that we talked about, which was when I think we first decided we could open it up to uh, like arrangements of characters that aren't just couples, like more than just two characters, was like
Uh,
the one of the three
Audio?
witches scenes,
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
which I mean, it worked when we were talking about the show around like, October and Halloween, but it just
Right,
it wouldn't
right.
have fit in the script.
Yeah, that's a tricky, specifically because it relies on, I think, knowing, in the absence of having like an entire production of Macbeth coming after it. I think it needs a lot more context, um, than we could give it in this sort of Shakespeare sampler.
Yeah. I think it would be interesting from like an audio theater standpoint,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
it
Sound
definitely
design
would
can
have
do great things
oh
with that.
yeah. It definitely would have stuck out like a sore thumb though.
True, true.
So, because these did have to be a bit cohesive and create one production together, um, were there any interpretive liberties you took when doing table works of the scene where you knew the audience would not have as much context as if they were hearing the whole play? So, was there anything you needed to interpret differently or work differently with the characters?
Hmm, that's a great question. Um, well, I specifically chose scenes that I felt you could be, dropped into and get a general sense of what was going on. Um, Maybe not of the arc of the entire play, but the central conflict in that scene is pretty apparent. Um, like for example, in Midsummer, um, you may not understand why people are falling in love with each other, at the what's the what is the expression? On I was gonna say on the turn of a dime. Is that a thing?
I
Um,
think so.
just like that. But the idea that they're all arguing with each other over what's just happened, over this sudden change in character, I think definitely comes across. Um, for Lear and Macbeth, especially. Well, Lear had the advantage of being the first scene, um, which is naturally, not building off of much before. Um, Macbeth was the trickiest in terms of stuff we could have put in there, but the blessing and the curse of it being one scene was that it's short and quick and to the point, and also you've got an entire play that you have to disregard and just focus on the one scene and how that works independently of everything else.
Yeah, I'd say that's something that Ella had a very good eye for and was kind of always watching out for when we were like compiling scenes for the script. Um, she was very like awesome about making sure that each scene would work in relation to each other, but also itself was coherent, and had its own arc and its own like story and kind of conclusion, both in terms of just like the script itself that we gave to actors, but also like in hearing her direct, like the Macbeth scene in particular, is very obvious that she had a plan in mind to how to like make this like very interesting exchange between these two characters that is a very fundamental part of like the overall action of the play work as like a mini drama within itself. That was very clear and that was very awesome to watch. Um, and another great thing about Shakespeare is that, you know, it's all in the public domain. So
Yeah.
you can rework some of the lines and the scripts to, you know, fill some things up for different characters, make it make more sense. Like, Ella, if you want to talk about it, I know you added some lines for Cordelia in our King Lear scene.
hmm yeah, so I did go through the scripts, cut lines for, either that were assigned to characters that were not, I don't want to say extraneous because they do serve a purpose, just they're not the focus of the scene. So in Lear, we have this entire conversation going on between Gloucester and Edmund that was struck. I think Cornwall and Albany have lines in there, and Kent is there. Um, Kent, who will serve a great dramatic purpose later, but in terms of Lear's relationship to his daughters, is kind of outside of that picture, of that, dynamic. So I thought, especially because Cordelia in particular, it always struck me as someone who should not take being banished like all of a sudden from her family, from her country, just lying down. I reassigned some of Kent's lines to her, and the effect of that was not only to give her a bigger part, but to add more shades of the relationship so that when Cordelia says, my life was never but a pawn for you, we get the sense that she is aware of this political game that's been going on before the scene has started. The political game that has extended into this scene, and it's a conscious rejection rather than that her understanding of politics is so naive just because she has this good heart and nothing else matters. I think it's a lot more dramatically powerful if she does understand and she chooses to be a good person and stand up to her father anyway. So it's as much about character development of the characters that are remaining in the scene as it is about, the logistics of finding ways around the other characters that happen to be in the scene.
Yeah, so for the characters, you really had to work with the actors to make sure they knew exactly who the characters were and exactly what was going on. How
Mm.
easy or difficult was it to cast the characters and then work with the actors?
Mm. Um, well, we were lucky to have so many great auditions. Really, I was worried that, there wouldn't be enough interest in a Shakespeare episode and we'd have to do a lot of restructuring. But thankfully, we did get a group of just fantastic actors that were really like ready to jump in and learn about the scenes, and bring in that prior knowledge that they had had as well.
Yeah, I remember we discussed um, how much potential interest we thought there might be in this episode, but that really ended up not being a concern we needed to have in the long run, which was like exactly what we could have asked for, you know? It
Yeah.
was, yeah. Um, yeah, and I don't know from like a directing perspective, but from like a dramaturgist perspective, everybody came in knowing the source material like the back of their hand. They were incredible. So everybody kind of had a lot of thoughts already about who their character was, particularly in this scene. Um, so a lot of that, the fear of, oh, are they going to be able to adapt to like only doing a scene and not doing a full play? It didn't even really fully play out because they kind of grasped what the concept of the show was really quickly.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, from a directing standpoint, that was also great, and especially with the shorter rehearsal time that we had, rehearsal and recording time, um, it it was great to see people coming in already knowing their stuff. I think one of the main challenges to getting into Shakespeare is just the accessibility of the language, and maybe like these plots that you might assume people know. Well, for some of these, I don't know, but especially the language, to have people who were comfortable working with it already, or became comfortable with it in a really outstanding period of time, um, was also great. Allowed us to focus on the intention and the meaning behind the words.
Yeah, that's great that you had like all the actors like prepared. That's like really lucky. And I think honestly, anybody looking to do Shakespeare and who is like, oh yeah, I'll do Shakespeare for fun, is probably because they like
Yeah,
Shakespeare already, you know?
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
100%. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, Switching a bit, what was the significance of the sonnets in relation to the scenes that you added?
So a lot of the scenes, especially like if you're going from a scene from A Midsummer Night's Dream into Macbeth, that's for the audience. That's pretty jarring, tonally. So it serves the sort of larger, I don't want to say narrative, but the through line there, sort of ease the scenes into each other. But also, since the sonnets um, serve almost as many monologues, I've done sonnets as monologues as like acting exercises, or especially I think teachers of Shakespeare love them for that purpose because they expound upon a single theme and are good for like learning the speech and punctuation patterns. Um, and also, they tend to reflect the themes that he's writing about in the plays. So when I was able to find a sonnet that sort of encapsulated the an idea carrying over from the first scene, and the sort of tone or final couplet at the end that maybe suggests the tone of the next scene, that it just seemed like a natural segue between them, and also a chance to get to know like one character in isolation, maybe one character who we haven't heard that much from in that one scene, but would definitely have these complex feelings about the relationships that can be expanded upon in a full production. We're giving them a bit of that chance, the chance to explain themselves, really, um, after that scene has finished.
Yeah, I really like how you took one of the actors from each scene to read the sonnet and kind of make it almost part of the scene, because it really like makes the whole production more coherent, and it does add, like you said, that like transition, that finality to the scene, kind of like an end cap.
One thing I wanted to make sure that it was clear, because we're not continuing the narrative of the play, when the scene ends, was that each has a definitive and, I guess, forward pointing ending, a definitive ending that um, that the audience can feel satisfied with. We wanted to make sure each scene had a finality to it, that the audiences felt like that chapter had closed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the sonnets really helped support what we talked about earlier with making sure each scene had its own arc. Um, and some of the scenes end, somewhat abruptly. So adding just the extra text of the sonnets gave some of the performers a chance to wrap up their own kind of story in the scene and really help define the overall arc of each individual scene, which also connected them to the next one. So it like serves that dual purpose of both being a bow on the scene and also like the connective tissue throughout.
Yeah. um yeah, so for this production, um what was your favorite parts of working on this production? Like maybe a specific scene, a specific monologue, some actor chemistry.
For me, my favorite, I guess, they're all great, but my favorite part of the rehearsal or table work process is getting to hear the actors' um, ideas of the characters, because that's the time when me as a director, I get to discover things about the characters that I hadn't even considered before, that make the interpretation like make 10 times more sense, or lead us to an entirely new interpretation. That's really a collaborative effort between all of us, all the people in the room. And often, it's difficult to start the process of like asking questions about the character, that can't be answered in a simple yes or no. But once the actors get into it, I think, and start, posing each other questions, building off of each other's ideas, and we get that, really collaborative energy in the room. That's just like, oh, so good.
Yeah, I think I really enjoyed like the script
Mm.
work, but I I think the moment we started doing the like discussion talk with the King Lear scene, which was the
Yeah,
first one,
yeah.
th- that was just like a really fantastic, beautiful
Mhm.
moment. Um, like for me personally, I love King Lear. It was one of my first Shakespeare plays, but just like hearing everybody, like when Ella posed her first couple questions, everybody kind of jumped in and was like, okay, yes, here's what my here's what Regan's been doing, and this is why
Uh-huh.
she's like this, and this is how she feels about all of her sisters. Like, they just immediately had like this grasp of these like complicated dynamics, and they were super into like analyzing the
Mm.
political parts of the script as well as just like the family dynamics, and that was so cool. That was like one of my
Mm.
favorite moments.
Yeah. It I think it was harder to do with Midsummer and Much Ado, just because well, Midsummer was recorded separately um, for most of the characters, and Much Ado, I mean, really came in with like everything in place already. We did our first read through. I was like,
Mhm.
wow, okay, y'all got it. Um, but that's not to say it didn't happen. Um, I just all of the scenes. The actors were really good, man. Um, I don't know what else to say, but besides just the sheer creativity and I think I keep saying collaboration, but collaboration um, between people is what theater's about, you know? And it was great finding that even over Discord.
Yeah, yeah, it really is different. Um, Seeing something, doing something that's like very much done on every single stage, Shakespeare, and then putting it to audio drama and then trying to do
Yeah.
something with it. It's
Mhm.
very hit or miss. And like with every production we've done on the podcast, it's been very new for the directors to go into the audio version of their productions. And I think uh, I think I was in one of the rehearsals for King Lear, but from what I saw from that, everyone was like really involved. Everyone was really open to the new medium and also very enthusiastic about the script and about the actual
Yeah.
Shakespeare part of it.
Yeah, that that was awesome that everyone was excited about it. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Awesome. Is there anything, Leanne or Ella, that you wanted to add or touch on about this production that we haven't touched on yet?
I mean, I could talk more about like the the medium of the audio drama, but I don't know if that's interesting or relevant.
Yeah, no. So the last talk back we did was with uh Blake
Yeah.
Pearson for the playwriting contest, Play on Your Words playwriting contest. And we talked about he as a playwright was writing for an audio medium. So now you have the source material as Shakespeare. It's kind of already set. You changed a few lines, but that's about it. How was putting that to audio? How was working with a new medium? Was it challenging? Was it easy? Was it did it create a different interpretation of the script?
Um, I don't know that it created necessarily a different interpretation, but it definitely changed the way in which we create that interpretation. Um, Directing for just audio, you really have to like flip the switch into it only matters what people are hearing. Um, because you can be the most animated performer and no one can see that. Um, so I think it's definitely just as a medium, it requires a lot of different um, different modes of expression. I have been lucky enough to do, or I guess to experience directing Shakespeare and acting Shakespeare in a solely audio format with a production of Macbeth, which we conducted over Zoom, which, as you can imagine, was technical difficulties
Bit chaotic.
galore.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it also fosters creativity in that, if you're forced to be creative about how best to express yourself, then that can lead you to realizing there's more tools at your disposal than you had previously thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. I obviously don't have like any directing insight into like the audio medium, but I do just think like if you're going to take something that's typically staged and put it into an audio format, like the language that's used specifically and the language that's spoken has to be very like interesting and like compelling. And if there's, I don't know if there's another playwright who's been more adapted than Shakespeare, and like his language just lends itself to so many different like scenarios and scenes. So both in like a way that it's a challenge, there's also a really strong precedent for changing the situation in which these plays are presented. So that definitely can be a challenge, but it also like I don't know, like makes it seem more possible. I don't know.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's a strength to have this versatile language in Shakespeare that you can put it anywhere and it's still Shakespeare. And it still holds its meaning.
And it's recognizable. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's very difficult in an audio standpoint to train your actors to be like, hey, it's audio. People are not going to see your facial reactions to other people's lines.
Yeah.
It's cool if you make them because it helps your acting, but they're not going to see it.
That was particularly weird to me, learning how to perform on podcast. And I've tried to incorporate that knowledge into my directing as best as possible. But yeah.
Yeah, I know when we did No Exit, we had the absolute luck to work with Guffey Can Studios in person. So it was only a 4-actor cast, and it was in person, and you guys actually got to see each other and see your reactions, which I think definitely helped. And I think it's very different to have it completely virtual on Discord than to do it in person if we are recording.
Yeah. I don't even know what any of our actors look like.
Yeah, the hardest part is putting names to faces after you've heard the voices. You're like, okay, well.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm glad people are taking pictures of their setups because that was cool seeing. I think it was Jonathan and Caitlin who were putting pictures of their setups.
Are so cool.
And we've been posting them on social media, which is really cool to see, like how everyone has their own little area to be on Discord and to act with each other.
My setup is literally a laptop on a bed, so I'm impressed by the officiality of it all.
Yeah, it was cool. Yeah, once again, thank you to Ella Mizera and Leann Mullen for joining me today. Listen to Couples, Companions, Conspirators, a Shakespeare collection, by going to playonwordspodcast.com or looking up Play on Words Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, which is probably right here. Play on Words is produced by me, Soren de-Niz, with technical direction by Mackenzie L. Martin. Thank you for listening and for continuing to support the arts. Good show, everybody. Good show.
Good show, everybody. Good show.
Good show, everybody. Good show.